Morning guys, welcome to the van. We've got the notification back from the DVLA now, so the van is now a motor caravan, and now all we need to do is get it MOT'd. So we've got to get it out of the garden for the first time in I think 14 months. Well, I think we put it into the garden in October last year, so it's been a long drawn out process, but finally the van's going to get out of the garden and back on the road today. So it's a big day for us today because we get to drive the van all fully kitted out, so I'm really excited about that. So let's get that fence out, get it out of the garden, and then we can get it back on the road. Back in the van for the first time in probably about a year. Feels really good to be behind the wheel again. We're just off to get the MOT sorted out. Just going to the test centre. And for those of you who don't live in the UK, it's an annual test that you need if the vehicle's more than 3 years old, just to prove its roadworthiness. So we've got to get the MOT done, then we can get the road tax, and then we're good 3 years motoring. So I'll catch up with you again as soon as we've done the test. While we're in the MOT test centre, I've got some bits of footage that I haven't released on a video yet. It wasn't enough to make a complete video in its own right. Things like me doing the final connections to the cooker. So you can watch that video now while we have the van tested, and then I'll come back to you after the test is complete and let you know how we got on. The cooker that you see here obviously has got to have a permanent copper connection on the back of it. So I've already made a short piece of copper onto where the gas connection is at the back of the cooker. The cooker sits on top of the worktop, so in order to get that in and be able to connect it, I've had to pull this base unit out of the way and then cut a big hole in the back of it, as you can see there. We'll make the gas onto this pipe here with an isolating valve. That'll be our connection point. That'll end up being in the back of the kitchen cupboard. We'll slide the oven into this recess because it's supported by the countertop. We'll make that gas connection, and then lastly we'll put that unit back into position. But it's the only way I can think of making this gas connection is to have that unit out, because once the cooker is in position, there's no way you can get behind it to make the gas connection. If anybody else knows of another way that this can be done, then please do leave me a comment below, because I'll be really pleased to know if there's another solution to this, because I've been racking my brains trying to figure out how I can get a permanent gas connection onto this cooker with it in position. You know, because you're not allowed to use flexible connections or permanently fitted appliances. So how they expect you to connect onto that gas connection on the back of the cooker when the cooker's in position with a permanent copper pipe, I've got no idea. I just want to run through how these compression joints are made, because I've seen one or two videos lately and people are doing it the wrong way. The joint comprises of the fitting, which has got a taper inside. There's a soft copper olive which fits inside that taper, and then you've got a compression nut which goes on the thread which pulls the whole joint tight. Now the joint is made between the olive and the taper inside that fitting. So at no point should you put PTFE tape around this thread. That is not where the joint is made. All that'll do is you've put PTFE tape around that thread, is that'll restrict you from pulling that compression nut up, and it will restrict you from compressing the olive onto the fitting, and you could actually be causing a leak rather than making the joint sound. The only thing you're permitted to do is when you put the olive onto the copper pipe is you can use a little bit of this gas safe jointing compound. This is Hawk White, there are other makes, and you just put a little bit of the compound, smear it over the olive, insert that into the fitting, and then tighten up the compression nut. And that is all you need to do with that joint. Obviously tighten it with a spanner, but never at all put PTFE tape on a compression joint. The easiest way to cut your copper tube is with one of these little pipe cutters. It's got a very sharp little cutting wheel in there, and then all you do is just place it onto your pipe. Just nip it up with the little wheel, just a little nip, turn it around, another little nip, turn it around, just keep doing that. Little nip, turn it around, and then after a few turns that will make a really nice clean cut through your pipe, and you won't have any burrs, and it will fit in the compression fitting really nicely. There you go. So it's got a nice smooth end to it, so that will go in the compression fitting really easily. I've just put a little bit of Boss White, the gas jointing compound, on this joint because, you know, they're in such an awkward place. I just want to be belt and braces. I don't want to have to come back to this joint, so I want every chance of it being sound first time. That's the gas connected. We've put this little backing block which is secured to the steelwork of the van, and then this little gas valve is secured to this block, so it's really nice and solid now. I've nipped up these two compression joints, and this is our means of isolation. This valve will actually be in the kitchen sink cupboard, so when you open the cupboard at the back of the kitchen sink you'll be able to isolate the gas supply to the cooker. So when the isolating valve is in line like that, that means the gas is on. And when you turn the valve quarter of a turn like that, that means the gas is shut. The cooker's now secured and fixed in place, and all of these gas lines are now done up and tight, so now we can do a pressure test. I'm just pressure testing the gas lines before we button up all of the kitchen and close it up with the furniture board, because if I need to do anything in there I'll need to take it all apart to get at those connections at the back of the cooker. So I've got a little pressure gauge here. This reads in millimeters of mercury, so 150 millibars is equivalent to about 112 millimeters of mercury. So we've pumped it up, we've left it for a good 10 or 15 minutes just to let the temperatures stabilise, because temperature has a massive effect on pressure. So it's all been stabilised. So this is our first reading, and then we'll come back in another 10 minutes or so and see what it's done. Alright, let's just check what the pressure gauge is doing on the gas. We've had the circuit feeding the kitchen on test for a good half an hour or so now. Yeah, he's actually gone up in pressure by just a couple of millimeters, but that's probably to do with the temperature. You know, it hasn't gone down, which is a great thing. So yeah, that's perfect. Before I get this kitchen unit all enclosed with the rest of the furniture board, I want to plumb the sink in while I've got really good access to the front and back and the taps. So first of all, I'm just going to put this little drinking water tap in. We've got this long bit of reinforced hose. This will get cut down and it will go into the jerry can that's in the bottom of the unit. And then I've just got to wire the 12 volt supply to the little switch that we put on the tap. Put the wires down through this other hole, and then I've pre-drilled some pilot holes for a couple of stainless steel screws. So that's where the tap's going to sit. We'll just pop a couple of screws in there. Got to do the sound effects. So this is our little jerry can that's going to hold our drinking water. We've got this little 12 volt submersible pump, and then the reinforced hose is going to go through the cap, and then it needs to connect onto this pump. So I just want to cut this hose roughly about there. And then we'll get some boiling water, soften that up, and then push that onto the end of the pump. So let me just show you what I've done here before we button this all up with the furniture board. I've made a little box out of some leftover Celotex insulation. I've foil taped all the edges just as a little container for the water to sit in, but obviously it's kind of like a little bit of an insulated jacket around it as well. I've put an inline sort of kettle plug disconnect for the 12 volt sump pump, just so I can easily just unplug that if I want to just unscrew the cap and take the jerry can away to fill up. So rather than if I unscrew that cap, the cable's just going to get twisted, so I could just simply disconnect it there. And it's just a means of local isolation as well. And then I've run the cable and the hose up, and then I've got a little junction box on the back here that I'll show you on the other side. Here's the electrics for the 12 volt drinking tap. I'm just going to run through what I've done here before I button up this junction box. This cable here is the 12 volt supply from the battery. So this is the permanent 12 volt live, and this is the 12 volt neutral. I've taken a permanent live, which I've indicated by this little bit of red tape, up to the switch, and then there's a switched live coming back, and then the switched live is connected to the live of the pump. So when you press the switch, the permanent live is made, and that puts a live onto the live of the pump, and then it simply remains just to connect the two neutrals together. So that's the return path, that completes that circuit. So effectively all I've done is I've just broken the live feed to the pump with the little switch. As soon as you press the switch, that just makes the live onto the pump. I'll put these couple of junction boxes here. This one's for the fridge and this one's for the little cooker. I've got to pull a couple of power cables through this hole here, which will be the supply from our control panel in the garage. And then what I'm doing is I'm just pulling in a 4-core cable up this conduit here to where the fuse spur is going to be. I'm using a double pole isolator. So what I've done here is I've got a live and neutral supply coming into the switch and a live and neutral switch supply going to the appliance. I've used a 4-core cable here. I know this is the earth, but as long as you colour code it with some electrical tape, and then you'll know in the future that that's a live and it's not an earth. And in this case it's 12 volts, so we only need the positive and the negative anyway. So what I've done is I've put a 4-terminal junction box behind the fridge, and I'll explain to you what we've got here. This cable's the incoming supply from the batteries, so this is the positive and the neutral at the bottom here, which is the supply. That's connected to this cable and this cable, and they go up to the switch. So that's just purely just connecting those cables together. So that's the positive and negative to the live side of the switch, and then coming back down, the one with the tape on is the switched positive, and the other one with the black tape on is the switched negative. So this is the switched positive terminal, this is the switched negative terminal, and then this cable is feeding the fridge. So that's the switched live to the fridge, and that's the switched neutral. These are the double pole switches that we'll be using. It basically means it's switching both the live and the neutral. On the bottom of the switch you've got the live in and the neutral in, and on the top of the switch you've got the live out and the neutral out. And then we have got a couple of earth terminals here, but in our application we won't be using those. So your incoming supply you'd connect to the inside, and then the load side of your appliance you'd connect to the outside. So here's what the finished switch looks like. We've got the splashback to go on here yet, so this switch will just have to come forward. But now I know if I turn this switch off, I've isolated both the positive and the negative to that appliance. For the 230 volt sockets in the van, we're going with these polished nickel switches which have got built-in USBs. The wiring on these is a lot simpler. You've just got live in here, neutral in here, and then you've got a couple of earth options. So you only need to pull a 3-core cable into these sockets. Here we've got our brown is the live, blue is the neutral, green and yellow for the earth. So there we go, quite a compact kitchen area, well provisioned with appliances, really nice quality finish. Well, the good news is the van's passed. I've got the MOT certificate here, so now all we've got to do is get it taxed, which we can do online as soon as we get home, and then we're good for the next 12 months. Each little certificate is like a little victory. I remember when the V5 came back from the DVLA and we got the confirmation that it had been converted to a motor caravan, I was so happy I was literally dancing around the kitchen table. So that's everything we need now, everything's in place for the next 12 months. The van's all legal, all been checked out, and it's all roadworthy. I'm going to spend some time with family and friends just for Christmas. It seems daft to go away now as we're so close to Christmas. And then in January we're going to make sure the van's all fully kitted out, pack it all up, and then we'll be off on our European tour. Just want to say a massive thanks to everybody that's commented and given us all this support during this build process. We really have appreciated all the nice comments that you guys have given us. If you've got any questions about any part of the build, or there's some part that you want to see, then do leave me a comment below. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up, and as usual do share it on social media. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Cheers.